This was always something that was on the fringes. And we believe that's part of the biggest challenge around psychedelics is not necessarily proving the safety and efficacy of these substances, but destigmatizing them to both the psychiatric community and the patients that really need them.
Today, folks, we got some big news coming out of Mindmed. We're going to be breaking down an article directly from the company on the advancements of their psychedelic medicines, along with an article that I think shows a true sign of the times and the shift in how people think about psychedelics as medicines. And on this news, the stock is trading up 5.5% today. It is pulling back from its high of the day of $1.20. And in full disclosure, as always here, guys, I'm currently holding on to 7,846 shares at an average price of $4,773, or the equivalent of 60 cents a share. Now, in the clarity of my transparency, all of the wonderful homework I do for you beautiful buggers, consider hitting that like button because it definitely helps the channel out. The first article we're going to get into is from the Rolling Stone that says Oregon decriminalizes all drugs while DC decriminalizes psychedelics. This is some incredibly huge steps forward in basically getting Mindmed to the forefront of solving some major problems. Now, it says, while the 2020 presidential results remain unclear in the morning after the election day, one thing for certain is that voters overwhelmingly approved a series of measures aimed at the war on drugs, including the legalization of the MJ markets in New Jersey, Arizona, and Montana, and the decriminalization of psychedelic, those little magical spores that grow outside, in Washington, DC, and the decriminalization of all drugs in Oregon. Now, I think this is a true testament to the fact that people are starting to recognize that people that have drug abuse problems have an underlying mental issue, and the laws are just way too heavy, because if you have a tiny amount of these hardcore substances, you could go to jail for like 15, 20 years, and that really doesn't solve your underlying issue. Now, voters in the state of Oregon also voted in favor of Measure 109, which allows for the patients 21 and over to buy, possess, and consume psychedelic drugs at a psilocybin service centers under the supervision of trained facilitators, while Measure 110, which decriminalizes personal possession of drugs like, these horrible ones we just talked about that I hope YouTube doesn't flag me over, also overwhelmingly passed with 60% of votes in favor. Measure 110 also called for the establishment of a drug addiction treatment program funded by its MJ tax revenue. Now, this is what I'm talking about, guys. We start with the least deadliest drugs, legalize them, take the taxes from that, and use that to solve the hardcore problems. Absolutely agree with this. Today's victory is a landmark declaration that the time has come to stop criminalizing people for drug use. This comes from Cassandra Friedrich, the executive director of the Drug Policy Alliance. Measure 110 is arguably the biggest blow to the war on drugs to date. It shifts the focus where it belongs, on people and public health, and removes one of the most common jurisdictions for law enforcement to harass, arrest, and prosecute, incarcerate, and deport people. As we saw with the domino effect of the MJ legalization, we expect this victory to inspire other states to enact their own drug decriminalization policies that prioritize health over punishment. And oh my God, I couldn't agree more.
And there are quite a few decriminalization measures hitting ballots locally across the US. As this movement gains steam, how do you think it will impact the future of psychedelic research?
Look, I think the story that investors want to back and are backing in Compass Pathways and in Mindmed is a story of mental health and addiction and dealing with it in a regulated manner at a federal level. We still don't have regulated cannabis at a federal level in the United States. We, as a company, we don't believe people should go to jail for a substance that can help them. But at the same time, we really believe that these need to be brought through the FDA. They need to be regulated in order for us to adequately reintegrate them into our society. And that's going to take time. It's going to take clinical trials. But everything that we do, we want to do at a federal legal manner.
Which is a true testament for the hype train that I believe is coming in the near-term future for these psychedelic companies. Now, what is going on with Mindmed themselves? What are the advancements? Because we did get some news out of their trials with their LSD here, guys. Some pretty interesting stuff. If we go into their newsletter, it says that Mindmed announces the completion of phase 1 study measuring the doses of effects of LSDs. Now, why is this important? Well, we all know that the phase 1 trials that they are testing out right now, basically, from my understanding, have nothing to do with the actual treatment of what they are trying trying to approach when you're talking about suicide headaches, anxiety, ADHD. The first thing they obviously have to do is figure out what the dosages are going to be and where is too much, where is too little, and then find what they can actually utilize for their phase 2A and phase 2B trials. And I can't wait to see what results come out of these phase 2s. But just taking a look at the actual study itself, guys, and I highlighted a small portion here because this is some insanely technical stuff. I'm not a doctor. I am not a pharmaceutical expert. I don't know how the brain works to the fullest extent that these guys break it down into. They get into like the cognitive impairment, the imagery, the elementary, like the audio visual. Like they went hardcore here, guys, at which I'm just going to read to a very small statement that I highlighted right here. Altogether, the available data supports the view that mainly high acute positive effects of LSD can be induced at 100 UG. I'm not sure what that dosage is, so I'd have to do some more homework there. Therefore, we speculate that the dose of 100 UG of LSD may be selected for treatment of depression or anxiety where higher oceanic boundlessness and lower anxiety ratings acute induced by psychedelic predicted better treatment efficiency. Now, that is a mouthful of a statement, and this entire article is basically like this. They use very technical terms on their dosage effects because they find if they basically raise the dose too high, people get anxious, they get more problems that come with the drug effects. But they also found really good after effects. As I continue reading here, guys, the dose that used in the present study also produced substantial positive mood effects and notably only very small and non-significant anxious ego dissolution, which many people know that when you take these psychedelic medicines, they break down your ego, you disassociate from yourself, which comes with anxiety, but they're saying with no anxiety. Thus, the 50 UG dose may be useful for inducing a moderately intense and predominantly positive psychedelic experience. This low psychedelic dose would likely be a good starting dose to be used in patients with no previous experience with psychedelics or in subjects who are considered to be more sensitive to the effects of these drugs. So again, this isn't really proving that these drugs are effective for what they're trying to treat to any major degree. They're just trying to find the best dose levels. I'm going to leave the link to this in the description below if you guys want to read through the actual article itself straight from the study, which I do believe is in Basel, where they pulled this study off.
So we're working with substances that sound like the 1960s, but frankly, we're never really given a chance. And we think that they have breakthrough potential in terms of helping patients with mental health and addiction. And so we're working on things like LSD and using that in LSD or psychedelic assisted therapy for anxiety disorders. We'll be finishing up a phase 2 study of that that's ongoing right now in Switzerland. And we're hoping to bring that back to the US and furthering that. Mental health and addiction are America's unfortunate next great growth story. And I believe that Wall Street and investors have noticed that, well, sitting around in a four-walled box for the last 6 months, that mental health and addiction can have a big impact on society. And so we saw with one of our peers that just listed on Nasdaq and their IPO had very, very successful IPO, Compass Pathways. And I think the reason is mental health and addiction are very big and vast problems in America right now.
I'm kind of itching on the edge whether I would pick up more shares here or not. I'm trying not to overexpose myself and keep focusing on some good stabilizing dividend stocks, but in the same notion, this thing is going to be on the forefront of one of the biggest medical dilemmas that society has ever faced when we're talking about opioids, suicides, like all the stuff that we have no cures for right now. And it is the largest drug segment in the entire pharmaceutical sector. I mean, it's just unbelievable saying those statements and looking at some of the research that they bought up from the 1950s and what we already know about these substances. So I'm going to be holding tight on the shares I have. I have absolutely no plan on selling them into the near term. And every time I think about selling them, I just look at stuff like this and I get lit up inside to hold those shares steady and see what, the next 2, 3 to 5 years might even bring. Because like I said, if there's any company that could turn 1,000 into, a 6-figure investment, it's this sucker right here. Now, I'd like to know what you guys think in the comment section below. As always, a straight cut and dry video today. I'm going to try and make more news videos like this just so I can get it to you guys as quick as possible and as accurately as possible. So stay cool, stay awesome, and I look forward to catching you guys tomorrow.